Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we're going to cover all the home teams. We'll talk about the Saints, LSU, Tulane, Pelicans, UNO, all on tap this afternoon on this absolutely Chamber of Commerce day here in New Orleans. Where's my director, William Hill? Can we open up the windows here today? I mean, the breeze that's blowing. I mean, we live for this weather here in South Louisiana, and of course, today's the first day of it, first day of fall for us. And we got the A team today. We got two guys that again know sports inside and out, from CrestCitySports.com, from 106.1 FM, from Saturday Down South. It is Jude Young and also Les East. Guys, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming down, as always, doing our Reporters Roundtable. Over the last 2 years, we've had you guys, solo, and it's been great, but thanks for coming down as a tandem today.
It's a pleasure.
We'll start with you, Jude. I want to talk a little bit about what you guys are involved in, and of course, everybody can hear you guys on Friday night from Francesca by Katie's. Talk about it.
Yeah, we're there for 5 hours. We'd love for you to join us starting at 6 o'clock every Friday during football season for Countdown to the Original. Before Ken Trahan's original prep football report, we always have a school-themed night with the head coach, fans, cheerleaders, players. It's a neat setting over in Lakeview, and we certainly would love it if you could come out and join us for one of those weeks. If not, please tune in on 106.1 FM. Of course, CrescentCitySports.com has us both very busy this time of year, and it only gets busier with basketball season just around the corner. I'm also the voice of the UNO Privateers on the hardwood. Looking forward to another season there as well. So busy. Of course, my radio show coming after yours. I'm on Tuesday nights this time of year at 6 o'clock on 106.1 FM, talking all sorts of stuff like we're about to today.
Yeah, there you go. Les, welcome back to the show. Of course, Saturday Down South, CrestCitySports.com. Tell us about it, and also about your book, which again, everybody should have. If you haven't read it yet, you're missing out.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, the book is called Donkeys, Elephants, and Giraffes. It's a novel about politics and the media with sort of a sports twist on it. You can get it online at all the major platforms, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, etc. Staying busy with my partner here on CrescentCitySports.com, as well as on Friday nights, covering LSU and now Mississippi State at SaturdayDownSouth.com, which is, I think, probably the foremost SEC website around these parts. And one thing I want to mention is this week I have a story in the Clarion Herald about Gail Benson, who continues to volunteer as a lector at the St. Louis Cathedral, including Sunday morning when the Saints are at home, which she did for the Tampa Bay game. She read at the 9 a.m. Mass, got over to the Superdome for their pregame Mass that they have in the offices, and then watched the game. And that was kind of the worst part of her day, I imagine. But so anyway, it's a story that gave me, Peter Finney Jr. gave me a lot of space to write the story, and I think it turned out pretty well, and I think people will enjoy it. So it's coming to a Catholic church near you. Pick up your Clarion Herald or go to clarionherald.org.
There you go. And also, again, you can see the Mass right here on WLAE-TV. Guys, voice of UNO athletics, voice of UNO basketball, soon to be maybe the voice of UNO football. And before we jump into Saints, I want to talk about this. This has been kind of on the back burner forever. I mean, I can remember when I was at UNO, and they were a long time ago, and they were talking about a football team. But it looks like maybe in the history of this conversation, we're probably closer than we've ever been.
Well, there's been a lot invested into the concept. Athletic Director Tim Duncan working with school president Dr. John Nicolo, trying to find out if this is feasible with the idea of how it can really enhance the entire university experience, growth in the student body. And as a result, there's a student experience bill, so to speak, that'll be up for vote by the students coming up in the first week of November leading into homecoming, and included in that is funding so that UNO can join the Southland Conference as a football member. They're a member in every other sport right now. That would be a massive deal if it can be done. There were renderings released to prominent boosters talking about that we wound up seeing in the paper, talking about building a 20,000 seat stadium on the lakefront, other facilities involved with that, a soccer and track facility as well on the main campus. So a really big deal that would bring cheerleader, dance team, marching band, and other funding for other student experiences, and a big push on the campus towards diversity, which is a big topic these days. All of that incorporated into this one vote, and there's a lot of confidence that the vote's going to pass, and if so, UNO could be playing football as soon as 2024.
Wow, 2024. Also, again, the stadium itself, maybe a development around that?
Right. The idea is they have a major partner. Some information has come out on that. More will come public very soon, that they have at least one major Fortune 500 level partner to try to build this stadium and incorporate a whole concept of not only a football complex, indoor practice facility, but developing housing and other commercial developments in that area around having more activity involved around sports. Because once you have those type of stadiums, then you talk about having the ability to perhaps, hey, there's an MLS team coming. There's some preliminary talks. Maybe that could be the home or the training home at least. As well as we know high school football, there's a lack of stadium availability when it comes to the private schools. It would be a major boost in that area as well to build a big facility that could host a whole bunch of other events year round. So a lot of excitement around the idea, not just how it'll help UNO, but Gentilly and the community at large.
I was going to ask you, it's down by the baseball stadium? That would be the complex
exactly
there,
right. And they're already they've already broken ground on building a significant beach volleyball complex, which is a big year-round thing now outside of just the college games that can be hosted there. Right now, UNO doesn't have an on-campus home for that sport, so that's just another piece of the puzzle. And obviously, if they have football, they've got to add a similar women's sport as far as numbers. That's why the soccer concept is coming up, and they would want to build that on the main campus by the athletic headquarters, which is now in the Health and Human Performance Center.
Okay, and of course, they've got that United Soccer League team that's been talking about doing something maybe on the riverfront. That could be shifted down to the lakefront, right?
There's no question that if you're ahead of the game and offering a ready-made brand new facility of that significance, that could be very attractive to those folks versus the red tape you might have to deal with that very coveted property right behind us as we point towards the river.
Les, Tulane's got a tough time getting their fans into the stadium. Another local university going with college football. First of all, how do we get people out to go to basketball, baseball, and football games here in New Orleans on a collegiate level where, 30 years ago, those arenas were packed. They're not packed anymore.
Yeah, the one thing I find interesting about the potential for UNO football is that one of the things UNO has had to deal with forever is the fact that it's a commuter school. So some of the students are a little bit older, most of them work.
Yes.
They drive to campus, they go to class, and then they leave because a lot of them have to go to work after that. And so there's not that on-campus lifestyle to go to weeknight events that you have in other places. Football, you're talking about a weekend game, maybe Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. There might be a Thursday or Friday mixed in. So I'd be curious to see if maybe that would not work against them on the weekends, where people would say, hey, we have a chance to go tailgate on the lakefront, watch this football team. You might get more alumni, you might get students coming back on the weekend. So I'd be curious to see if football might be able to overcome that particular disadvantage pretty well. In Tulane's case, you know, it's unfortunate that they didn't win the game Saturday against Southern Miss. I think it sort of snuck up on everybody. You know, they've had a few of these games. They had a Houston game a couple of years ago in prime time on a Thursday night. And I think it might have been Houston last year or 2 years ago. I think they had another Houston game where the team was doing well. ESPN was in town. It was a great opportunity to market it. And they still didn't quite sell it out. They haven't really won those games. They did have the one with the miracle game against Houston they won, but they've lost more than they've won, I think. But this one, you know, I don't think anybody saw this coming when the season began. They won those first two games against outmanned opponents. Then they go win in Kansas State, and all of a sudden, and they did a great job. I think Lenny Van Gilder wrote about this. They did a great job of being poised to capitalize on a breakthrough win when it happened. And it happened with Kansas State, and they jumped on it. But again, they win on a Saturday, and the next game's on the next Saturday. There wasn't really that anticipation, a lot of time to build up to it. And so I don't know that they got quite the turnout they had hoped for. And then, of course, to not be able to win a game that they led early on was unfortunate as well. And so that continues to be an uphill battle for Tulane. But Willie Fritz and his staff, for the most part, have done the main thing that has to happen, and that is sustained success. They had 3 straight bowl teams. They took a step back last year, might be a bowl team again this year. They just got to keep having those bowl seasons and stacking them one on top of the other. If they're ever going to get it done, that's where it has to start.
Well, it's more than that. It's not just winning sporadically or being average, a 6-6 team. You've got to win consistently and do it at a higher level. We saw basketball attendance shoot up this past season when signs of life under Ron Hunter were pretty clear. Exciting brand of basketball, playing in a good basketball league, and the crowd was significant. It was a home court advantage. Baseball, we know if they can get back to the level we've seen them, people will come. And I think the same is true for football, even though there are obstacles related to the neighborhood and the concessions that have to be made that hurt the convenience for the fan to be able to attend those games. When I see that open green space on Carrollton, on Claiborne, and I live right in that neighborhood, that general area on game day, and how that could be used for parking, for tailgating, and make it easier for fans to be excited about the game day experience, that's depressing. I wish there could be something done with the city to improve that and take advantage of the space that is available. But at the same time, students do attend the games in significant numbers in that section, in that one end zone. They weren't doing that in the Superdome on those levels. And if they win, more and more people will come to these games. But it can't just be a deal where you have this spike situation, one good win, or you're winning 6 games. Start contending for conference championships, and fans will want to be a part of a winner.
What about your school? What about UNL? What about getting people out there to the arena to see, again, the basketball team, baseball, and then now again the introduction of football, which I think is exciting, honestly.
Well, Les touched on the issues as far as the makeup of the student body, far more commuter students. Hopefully football passes and it adds that extra bit of life and brings a different type of student. You expand the student body with a younger student coming right out of high school who's looking for the traditional college experience, because now you're offering closer to that. At the same time, the Southland hasn't been a power conference in basketball. It's a lower level conference. When we say mid-major, we're being kind. It's more of a low major. As a result, you've really got to do something something special to attract people's attention, particularly in a town that has an NBA product that you're competing against. That's made things much harder for UNO and Tulane the past 20 years. And with the success that we're expecting, and we're going to talk about later with the Pelicans, that's only going to make it more difficult. So football's a different animal, though, and because it's a public school representing the city and looking like if it passes that they're going to go full bore into trying to make it as successful as possible, you've got a chance to attract the community in ways that even Tulane can't. That's just my opinion.
Sure.
I would assume if this goes through, the first thing they should do is sign a long-term contract home and home with Tulane, right?
Yeah, you've got to believe it. Absolutely.
I would hope that that would be a starting point.
Well, it takes two to tango on that one, so I'm just throwing that out there.
And you guys know how I feel about all sports. Again, the local teams should be playing each other at everything. I mean, it's ridiculous that we do not have that. Those were the biggest games back in the day, right? Pelican Cup. You know, having those two teams play against each other. Those were great rivalries.
At least they do that in baseball, but in the end, you've got too many people involved in the equation that are worried about what they can lose versus what the fans of both schools can gain.
For both schools that need, again, attention to their programs, it's ridiculous not to do it. Right. It really is. All right, let's shift gears to the Saints. They are 1-2 in the division, 1-2 overall. They lose to Carolina 22-14. If we the injury list came out today. Jameis Winston did not practice for the second day in a row. Let's take you first because, again, he's had some issues. You know, I want to believe a lot of that is injury related with 4 fractured vertebrae, but he's been accurate. His mechanics are off. He's missing open wide receivers on the first and second levels. Yes. He's been able to complete the long ball at times. You know, last week's stats were really gaudy with the 49 and 48-yard bombs that he was able to complete. But again, it was the moving of the chains that we're used to. It's the hitting getting Alvin Kamara involved. Now again, you know, guys like Landry and Thomas, who are not the speed burners, who are a big part of this team. 2 interceptions versus Carolina. 2 interceptions versus Carolina. One was a tip ball, one was a kind of thrown up at the end. The three against Tampa Bay, 5 overall. Not practicing 2 days in a row in London. A lot of people are speculating that Andy Dalton now will step in for this upcoming game. You were at every practice, and that's why I'm taking you first on this. Was there a lot of difference between Dalton and Winston in practice?
Okay, well, first of all, let me say, missing practice today is significant.
Right, on a Thursday.
They said yesterday was rest. Dennis Allen said he expected them to practice today. Jameis said, I plan to play Sunday.
Right.
Now, we don't know. So the chances of Andy Dalton not only being closer to being inserted into the game if Winston struggles, not only is that greater, but I think the possibility of Dalton starting becomes more significant. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Now, getting back to training camp, I don't think there was a big difference between the two in training camp. I'm not sure how much to read into that. We know they're different styles of quarterbacks. Jameis is bigger, stronger, can throw the deep ball, the deep out better than Andy Dalton can. Dalton tends to be a little more accurate with the underneath stuff. And I think we saw that in training camp, and I think Dalton had a very good training camp. I think Jameis had a good training camp, but he was also limited for part of it because coming off the knee surgery. So I don't know how much to read into that. I think it just reinforced what we already knew about Dalton being a different type of quarterback who could do some things that Jameis couldn't do as well, but can't do some of the things that Jameis can do with the deep ball. Now, one thing I'm beginning to think about Jameis is he may be overthinking some of this stuff as far as mechanics, because he's talked 2 or 3 times since training camp about how in rehabbing the knee, he's started from scratch with all of his body motions, and he talks about your hips and your legs and your arm, and now he's got the back, which I think is unquestionably limiting him, and then he hurt his foot in practice last week, and I just think he's trying to process all of this stuff and think through his mechanics from head to toe. And I'm wondering if that's just kind of getting in the way of him playing football. And I think that's something they kind of need to look at and say, if you're well enough to play, way, go out there and play and stop thinking about your mechanics. And if you're not well enough, then let's give Andy Dalton a shot and see what happens.
Les makes a good point, because you can't possibly think about your mechanics on the field. It's like ever play golf. You can't take the driving range work to the course. You got to clear your mind and try to hit the golf ball straight.
Exactly.
I think that may be a factor, and the back just exacerbates that. When you're already concerned about, hey, I'm trying to be more mechanically sound so I can be more accurate, and you're in pain, you're thinking a whole lot about your body and not a lot about blitz pickups and who the hot receiver is and making your reads. And he looks compromised to the point where the one thing he does best, throwing the deep ball, he hasn't been nearly as accurate in the regular season so far as what we're used to seeing, except late in the Falcons game. But that was maybe more adrenal after taking some more hits there. So he's dealing with the back issue. That needs some time to heal up. I don't think, though, that the Saints, and I understand the apprehension for Dennis Allen, I don't think the Saints want to have to make the switch to Andy Dalton, not because he can't help them win games, because of the psychology of the team, of Winston himself, and the fact that in the end, their ceiling is much higher with Winston than it is with Dalton. They didn't make extra trades to get their hands on a Chris Olave and be aggressive in the offseason to compete for maybe making the playoffs. They think they have a Super Bowl caliber team still in a lot of areas. They're strong enough to make that claim. They're not going to get there with Andy Dalton at quarterback. This is the same guy who got his chance in Dallas because of injury, with Dak Prescott out, with a ton of weapons available, and he is an older backup quarterback, and it showed in that situation. So they know maybe if they switch to him, you can get this win in London and then come home to play a bad Seattle team and get yourself back over 500. Maybe that's in the cards, and that helps Winston get a little time to heal, not only physically, but maybe mentally a little bit and have a reset. But that does create the problem of, if you're winning when you make that move, makes it harder to go back to Winston, when Dennis Allen, who's now getting paid the big bucks to make these decisions, knows that if they're going to be a double-digit win team that can actually win in the postseason, it's really Winston that gives them by far the best chance out of those two guys. So I understand the apprehension.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree totally with that. I think that's why Dennis Allen has been reluctant to make the move. Because, well, it's only been 3 games, and he played well enough to win the first one. So
but he played in the fourth quarter.
Right, but he made the plays necessary to win the game, and then it's kind of gone south since then. So now, yeah, you can justify the move more easily, but it is opening a can of worms if Dalton goes and plays well, and you say you have all this pressure to stick with the guy who helped you win a game, and yet you think long term the other guy is the one who's going to make the big difference.
But isn't it all about winning, though, at the end of the day? I mean, is
it about winning Sunday, or is it about winning more games between now and then?
There's an injury here, guys.
You can't lose the big picture.
I get that, but
and if he's healthy enough to show up on Sundays and he's your starter, a lot of guys are playing hurt. You've got to make the decision with your medical staff, and in the end, it's Dennis Allen who has to decide, is this guy compromised to the level that I really shouldn't be taking this chance putting him on the field? Not the chance for his health, the chance for the football team to win on that day. That's what he's got to figure out.
And a couple of other points. One, the locker room. And they have a great locker room. We talk about this all the time. And I think the guys will handle whatever situation comes along. Jarvis Landry said, the main reason I came to New Orleans, aside from coming home, is Jameis Winston. And if he gets pulled after 3 games, then people are going to start saying, well, wait a minute, this is a guy, we all believe that this is a guy who can take us where we want to go. Let's be more patient. But another thing, and this is the pro Andy Dalton thing, I think if Andy Dalton were in the game, Pete Carmichael becomes a more comfortable play caller because he was calling an offense built for Drew Brees, who's more like Andy Dalton for all of those years. And the transition to a somewhat different system, not a dramatically different system, but trying to incorporate Jameis's strengths into that offense, I think is something they're struggling with Carmichael and Winston getting on the same page about what Jameis does best and how to call a game for Jameis. Whereas if Andy Dalton's out there, it's kind of like, oh, let's do kind of what we did with Drew. He's not Drew, but he's the same type of player. And I think, and that's a problem, is I don't think the game plans and the play calling has been very good either. And I think Pete Carmichael might be more comfortable compiling a game plan and calling plays for Andy Dalton.
Look, even even Sean Payton, as much as he was pass happy, would adjust the game plan in a given season, a given stretch of time, and say, look, we need to be more of a power football team first offensively, complement our good defense now, and run the football. You're not seeing that consistency in the game plan throughout games. And I know that Alvin Kamara has been compromised as well. The rib issue is significant. He's not the same player, or at least we haven't seen that yet in the regular season. But at the same time, you've had your starting offensive line available since game 1. And we can see a team, and again, excuses. You talk about your situation. You look around the league and you see a team like the Chicago Bears. Somehow, some way, they're 2-1, throwing less than 20 passes a game, and they're running for a bunch of yards. Last week, they won running for 280 yards. Their offensive line is not as good as the Saints. Their weapons in the passing game, the threaten and back off of defense, aren't as good as the Saints. But the game plan is the best for that team to give it a chance to be successful and win. Pete Carmichael deserves a ton of blame right now. Well, Winston's getting almost all of it because the Saints don't look like they're maximizing everything that they have to give their total offense the best chance to win.
Offensive line is an issue as well.
It is an issue, and you know, the left tackle is a concern. James Hurst is a veteran. He's a serviceable player, but you know, they were expecting that Trevor Penning would be growing in that position as a rookie. They've had problems there. Pete went out with a concussion the other day. We don't know if he's going to be available on Sunday. Cesar Ruiz has yet to live up to their expectations for him. But I think the bigger issue beyond the offensive line as a group is, and you touched on it earlier, about handling the pass rush. And that is identifying where the blitz is coming from and making sure everyone understands how to pick it up and they're all moving in concert to deal with that. Eric McCoy is supposed to be handling the calls for the line to take some of the pressure off Winston, and yet Winston also has to be on the same page with McCoy, and then has to be communicated to everyone on the offensive line. Now, Doug Marrone, I think, is a great offensive line coach, but this is his first year back with this organization. And so there's a transition period there because the way he is teaching this group is different than what they've had in the past. And so that transition, the injuries, and the inability to pick up the blitz as efficiently as they need to, I think are all issues beyond just individual linemen losing their individual battles. But on top of that, they have to fix that blitz thing fast because the league has seen this. They are going to get blitzed constantly until they prove they can handle it, because they've proven they cannot handle it.
And what would be a good way to make that progress in that direction? Start running the ball more and being dedicated to it. Look, Mark Ingram, he had a very costly fumble against the Bucs, but he had 6 yards a carry in that game against one of the better run defenses in football. The Saints need to be more dedicated to running the ball, particularly early in games, because that opens up the ability for your offensive line to play on the front foot, and you get the defense on its heels a little bit. And then that also gives Winston more opportunity once you've established that you're going to be able to run the ball successfully. It's a simple game. Play action and the ability to stretch the field with guys like Olave being there, you can have a much simpler offensive game plan when you have that kind of balance. Not only do you have to dedicate yourself to it, but you've got to establish it in the game to the point where it can open up that extra ability to make the defense really be concerned about, hey, how are they going to attack us here? We can't be so aggressive and bring so many people because they can hurt us with their ability to run and pass. We haven't seen that yet, even when they've had success running the ball in games.
And quickly, one other thing that I think needs to be part of the equation is virtually all of the success they have had on offense. They have 38 of their 51 points are in the fourth quarter. That has all happened when they've gone to the hurry-up game out of desperation. They have not gone to the hurry-up by design, and they don't want to do it for 60 minutes. I understand that. But I think they need to look at going hurry-up and tempo early in the game to try and get Winston untracked, maybe get the defense back on his heels and make it a little bit easier for the offensive line. So I think instead of waiting until they're in a desperate situation to go tempo, I think they need to try that early on.
Plan it proactively, even if you're doing well in the game, running your conventional offense, just to say, hey, we're going to try to attack the defense differently. We're going to plan on it, prepare for it, versus being reactive like they've been.
9 turnovers so far.
Most in the NFL.
Right, 7 sacks, okay, 7 sacks, 6 sacks against Tampa Bay, 1 against Carolina, 9 quarterback hits, 11 hurries, 1 sack against Carolina. Running the ball, 22 times for 84 yards, but Kamara had 15 carries for 61. Ingram had 5 carries for 18. And of course, Winston trying to get out of trouble, 2 for 5. So there's no dedication to the run there. Okay, even though you're saying 22 times again with Kamara getting 15 and Ingram getting 5. This week might have some issues. Michael Thomas may be out with the toe. He did not practice today as well. Ramczyk had a Veterans Day off yesterday, but is supposedly dealing with concussion. He was limited today. They need that full complement of the offensive line to be effective. But what do you guys say about Jameis Winston right now almost kind of reverting back to Tampa Bay Jameis? Now, is that a byproduct of how defenses are playing them, or do you think it's injury related? Because he is not the same guy he was in the handful of games he played last year.
Well, let's talk about the fact that the Saints are falling behind. That desperation leads to, hey, I've got to cut it loose. The defense knows we're throwing the ball, and that's where most of these turnovers are coming in the second half of these games. But also, the ball is moving a bit more. So, I mean, there's a plus and minus there when you're 2 scores down, like they've been, consistently now this season so far. So there's that. At the same time, the Jameis of last year, the weapons were terrible. You had the worst wide receiving core in football last season, and Sean Payton was very protective of that and not trusting Jameis Winston. So they had a game plan. They ran the ball more consistently, so they went into games saying we can't play ourselves out of games early, and we definitely need to run the ball to complement our defense. Again, that goes back to...
He ran more, too.
Yeah, there's no question. So now you don't have that with Winston. He's not going to be mobile with the knee, the foot, and the back, and you haven't established the running game enough to give him some extra help. Hopefully the starting 5's there on the offensive line this week, and better news Thursday than Wednesday on the injury report, as you mentioned. I think they're all going to be there, assuming that Ramczyk is available, Pete is cleared. I'm going to assume that's going to happen. If they don't run the ball here against a Minnesota front that's a little bit on the smaller side, they rely more on their quickness. That means you really need to go with power and run right at them. If they can't do that in this game, that's a major concern for the rest of the season, because they absolutely need it until, whether it's Winston not at 100% or Dalton stepping in there for the first time, who's more of a game manager.
The difference between last year's Jameis and this year's Jameis?
Well, I think circumstances have a lot to do with that. And again, I think he and Carmichael trying to figure out, how he fits into this system compared to what they've run in the past. But yeah, I don't think you can get away from the penalties and the turnovers. They have 8 turnovers. No, they have 9 turnovers. 8 of them came in the last 5 quarters and a couple of minutes. Okay, you look at the first possession against Carolina. That was a great drive they had going. They pick up 2 penalties that set them back. Okay, you go back to the Ingram fumble. They're about to take the lead on Tampa Bay late in the 3rd quarter, and they fumble the ball away. Okay, first series against Carolina, they're moving well. Kamara's got a 27-yard run. Everything's great. Troutman gets a penalty. Ingram gets a penalty. They punt. That should have been at least 3 points. Could have been 7 if they don't have the penalties. But still, Baker Mayfield was awful. The Saints were the better team for the first half of the first quarter. Kamara fumbles. They run it in for a touchdown. Game's 180 degrees different. So everything is skewed by the turnovers and the penalties.
And the 2 biggest turnovers of the season are those 2 fumbles. Ingram killing that drive at the 10-yard line when Tampa hadn't proven they could put a touchdown drive together, totally swung that game. And Carolina playing with a lack of confidence. Baker Mayfield was getting nothing done. The Saints were moving the ball. Fumble return for a touchdown by Kamara totally changed the game, because Carolina believed from that point they could win.
Yeah, I want to get through this quickly because I'm a little bit behind on my break here. Defensively, lack of sacks, concerning?
No, I'm not overly concerned. I think the rush has gotten better as the games have gone along, and I think they have too many guys with a track record of having been able to generate a pass rush, I'm not overly concerned about that. I think they're getting there.
I agree with that, and they have the numbers. We saw last year they were behind what their pace would normally be in coming up with sacks. It got better and better as the year went along. They do get enough pressures. The defense is still playing well enough to win these games, so I'm not overly concerned with that scheme working.
Back-to-back 100-yard rushes. Concern?
That is a bit of a concern, yeah, and I don't necessarily buy. I think Coach Mora said, of all people in the media this week, that he thought maybe that Demario Davis may be one of those players, the older players who's behind. I don't think he's losing a step. Now, Cam Jordan started slowly again. I can agree with that. And I'm a little concerned about Tyrann Mathieu. We see him more getting run over or missing tackles than making plays, but he's new to this scheme, and they've got to figure out how to work him in best. There's enough talent at all three levels of this defense that I think as long as injuries don't pile up, that they'll get better as the season goes along.
Back-to-back 100-yard rushes.
Yeah, that's a bit of a concern, but you know, I think numbers, you know, individual 100-yard rushes aren't as big a deal as yards per game, yards per carry, which aren't great either. But I don't think that necessarily is indicative of it. I think that'll come around. Again, they have too many good players who've proven it over a period of time that they should be able to do that. I agree with you. Tyrann Mathieu has not had the impact they had hoped for, but that still may come.
Certainly.
But you know, let's put it this way: if the offense and special teams had played to the level of the defense, they'd be at least 2-1, if not 3-0.
That was what I was going to know next. Quickly, special teams. Lutz has been inconsistent. Gilligan has played well at times, but even last week he wasn't there. And the surprising thing is the coverage teams have not been what they've been in the past.
Right, and again, I expect that's going to come along because they do such a good job building their 53-man roster in order to be good in coverage teams. It is the Lutz concern at this point. Having that kick block was huge.
That was all Kid, though.
Yeah,
Kid got pushed.
But at the same time, it was a low trajectory on a short kick. And then the miss against Atlanta wound up not hurting you. But again, he's not the Lutz that's been consistent like we've seen it in previous years before the injury. And until we see that, then yeah, you have to question it.
And I'll say this about the special teams and defense especially. I wrote this at Crescent City Sports on Sunday is, okay, if you look at the performances so far, they're a bad football team. For 3 games, they perform like a bad football team. Now, they have the coaches and the players and the track record to suggest that they will be, or at least should be, better than that. So we may see this a whole lot differently a month or 2 or 3 from now, because I think the track record suggests they're going to wind up being a lot better than they are. But until they do that, they're a bad football team.
But until they do that under Dennis Allen and they show more of a sense of urgency and focus early in games, you point at the head coach.
No, there's no doubt about it. And that's another thing. We talked about the quarterback deal. Don't want a controversy. Hey, that's part of the job. At the end of the day, you got to make the tough decisions. He is not. At this point, it almost feels like, again, he's a kinder, gentler coach and doesn't want to make the tough decisions. He's going to have to do that if he's ultimately going to be successful. All right, quickly, Saints in London against Vikings, they win?
You know, I just think they're going to be able to pull this one out. I'm going to hope for primetime Kirk Cousins because it's a feature game, and you get a mistake or two from him, and the Saints quarterback situation has worked out. But I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game. If anybody gets to 20, I bet they win it.
I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. I think it's more likely that the Vikings win.
Wow.
And I think 20 will be enough to win.
And if we could see William Hill's face right now, okay, he's going crazy. I have to get to a break. Here from my underwriters, you're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Les East, Jude Young. You see the music just coming on that. Eric Asher with you. We'll be right back.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Les East and also Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com and 106.1 FM Nash Icon. Of course, also Les is writing for Saturday Down South for both LSU and Mississippi State. All right, let's get an LSU 3-1, 1-0 in the conference, 38-0 winners over New Mexico. I really don't want to dwell on New Mexico. I really want to look forward to this weekend and Auburn. And I want to ask you guys first, how do you think this team is performing? I think the team is growing every single week after what we saw against Florida State. I like what I'm seeing. I talked about this on the radio show the other day. I think you play as many freshmen and sophomores as you can. I think that's the bedrock of what we're looking for in terms of a championship down the line here. I think they've done very, very well with again, their recruiting class this past year. And I think Ed's recruiting class last year was pretty good when you're starting to see those guys on the field. Add that with some of the juniors they have right now. I like the mix that Kelly has. What are your thoughts on this team right now?
Brian Kelly's a really good college football coach. Surprise, surprise,
Right.
He's showing it. And it's exciting because he's doing all of those things you mentioned, on and off the field, in building his program and showing the progress in season already that is surprising across the board, making adjustments with the problems on special teams and finding answers there. Matt House is proving to be a superb hire defensively because he's getting every ounce out of his personnel. Yes. They're mixing and matching at different levels of the defense for injury and for matchups in games, and they're getting consistent production now. They were dominant for the last 3 quarters against Mississippi State. They were tremendous. You don't want to mention New Mexico. Okay, that's a rental win, but at the same time, no matter who was on the field, they destroyed New Mexico. One blown coverage was half of New Mexico's yards for the night. Yeah. They were that good. And offensively, they're figuring it out. Jaden Daniels has obvious strengths and weaknesses, and they're making all the tweaks they need to get the most out of him, while now playing 2 true freshman tackles and mixing and matching in the interior of the line based on what they think is going to work best. They're not married to any particular player or concept. They started doing that in the spring, preseason practices, so they know what guys are capable of and trying to make different units of the offense and defense work. It's impressive. It just shows you why Brian Kelly wins everywhere he goes, and it also shows you that LSU had a lot more winning personnel because of good signing class, of the transfer portal, and the few key guys that they're able to keep when they lost so many. LSU almost reloaded in a way. They have no reason to think they can't go into any game and expect to win, and they should expect to win at Auburn because that's a complete train wreck.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree with everything y'all both said, and I think Auburn is a train wreck, and unless the remnants of the storm create a sloppy field.
And I don't think it is right now.
And I don't think it will.
They looked at it early this week.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it.
It looks like it's going to be nice and cool and crisp.
If it's a good track, I think LSU wins big. But here's why Brian Kelly's a good coach. You have too many coaches either are stubborn and they say, this is what I've decided is going to work, and we're going to stick with it until reality matches what I believe reality is. Or they overreact and they start panicking. Okay, Brian Kelly and his staff looked at what's going on and they said, okay, we got problems. What's the problems? What do we have at our disposal to fix it? They started 3 different offensive lines until they found the one that worked. Weren't afraid to go to the 2 freshman tackles. Ellinger probably won't play this week because
Bradford. It looks like he'll be in there.
I think they're going to move Frazier maybe to left guard. And then they'll probably put Bradford in at right guard, I guess.
Potentially Tremont Short.
Or Tremont
Those
Shorts.
are the 2 guys.
So nonetheless, he tried 3 different lines till he found one he liked. Okay, and he's going to have to deviate again this week. They tinkered with the wide receivers, who lined up where a little bit, and the wide receiver, even though Booty has not broken out yet, Malik Neighbors has been big, and Jeray Jenkins, most underappreciated player on the team, has been big. Then you look at the Perkins. I mean. Perkins, Harold Perkins, a freshman linebacker. They said, "What are we waiting on with this guy? Let's stick him in there. He's the leading tackler on the team." And then they took Greg Brooks Jr. and Jay Ward in the secondary, and they flip-flopped them, and it changed everything immediately. They got the calls were better. The recognition was better. The playmaking was better.
Ward was all over the field.
Yeah, Ward's the second leading tackler on the team, and he didn't play last week. So it's a steady hand at the wheel. They looked at it and they said, okay, we can make this better. We don't have the talent to contend for the SEC West just yet, but we can make this better. And they're making it as good as they can be, I think, with this unit. They've gotten better every week. They've grown, like you said. And I think LSU fans should be thrilled with what Brian Kelly's doing.
This is supposed to be a foundation year, right, guys?
There's no doubt.
I mean, they're not supposed to do anything this year. And look, we don't know what's going to happen in the meat of the schedule because that's coming up.
Sure.
Because this has really been a light touch schedule so far. But you got to like what they've been doing in increments week to week.
Right. Their offense has a ceiling because they're mediocre at running back. They are young up front on the offensive line.
Does Daniel make up for that?
And Daniels both makes up for it and hurts you. They're going to play more with tempo, it looks like, moving forward, because that's what he's more comfortable with. You talk about Kelly being willing to change. That's not usually the way he's looking to play, but you're going to see more of that, particularly against the better defenses, because the faster Daniels is able to move and not have to play the cat and mouse game pre-snap with defenses, he can make his quick decisions, usually go to his first read, or then take off and run. But because he's not good at finding the second, third, and fourth reads, he's shown a little bit of progress there, but he's a fourth-year starter. There's only so much in him, like a Jameis Winston. And we'll get to Michael Pratt. I think he has a little bit of that issue as well, and he's played enough where it's probably not going to change. So you have to tailor your team to that. So he's going to make some plays running. He's going to make some plays throwing the ball. Is he going to pick defenses apart with his mind and checking the second, third, fourth receivers on a regular basis? No. So they're going to build their offense around that, and it's going to cap the ceiling of how many points this team can score against the better teams. But now the defense has come along more than expected. So, hey, Tennessee leads the nation in yards per game offensively so far. They have a tremendous offense with Hendon Hooker at the helm. But I think this defense, if it comes out of the Auburn game healthy, is going to be able to match up in Tiger Stadium against those guys and find a way offensively to get the job done and, again, complement the defense. Both sides complementing each other. Kelly understands that brilliantly. LSU's going to have a chance, as long as they stay relatively healthy, in every game to be competitive and maybe win. And I'll say even Alabama, because you get them in Tiger Stadium. And watch the Crimson Tide this weekend. They've struggled the last few years on the road. If they struggle at Arkansas, that's going to show sign of vulnerability. That's the best team you have left. Who's to say you can't compete with them too?
Last final word.
And Arkansas is a good team.
Yeah.
I think that Tennessee game is huge. Now, if they lose to Auburn, we're having a different conversation next week. But I think they're going to win and win easily. Tennessee will be a great challenge for them, and I think that will be a great ball game that LSU will have a chance to pull the upset in, because I think they will be an underdog.
It's a shame it's not at night at Tiger Stadium.
Yeah, 11 a.m. The schedule the networks didn't do the Tiger fans any favors.
They did not. But it's going to be a beautiful day.
And if the heat comes back up, Brian Kelly has stressed the conditioning of this team. They've been winning games in the second half. They've been outplaying teams every week in the second half. So if the Heat wants to beat down mid-afternoon, second half of that game against Tennessee, it'll only help LSU.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Tulane 3-1. They lose to USM last week, 27-24. I thought Willie Fritz and his staff were outcoached by Will Hall. And I got to tell you guys, I've been on it all week long. I don't want to hear trap game. Okay, I don't want to hear it because, again, you have not done enough consistently to even talk about a trap game. Every single game should mean something to this team. You have no business looking forward or behind. But again, I hear trap game. They won in every statistical category, but on the scoreboard.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more about the trap game thing. And yeah, the disappointing thing is they got off to a fast start. They were up 2 scores early. I think you got to put that on coaching for the most part, and I would say a lack of confidence on a team that hadn't had a lot of success, but Southern Miss hasn't either, so that's not an excuse there. I just don't understand the Kansas State outcome. I watched Kansas State against Oklahoma a lot of that game. Kansas State quarterback is great. Kansas State played great against
Oklahoma.
that may be the greatest job Willie Fritz has done in his entire life, to go into Manhattan, Kansas, and beat Kansas State. That's amazing to me that they won that game, but I think that may have created a false sense of where this team is.
They did it against Oklahoma last year, the same thing.
Let's talk about how college football works. There can be wild variance from week to week based on the focus of a team and how the bounce of the ball goes. The whole game against USM turned because Tulane made key special teams area, block punt, miss kick, block kick, everything to work against them, and then when they fell behind, Pratt panicked and threw a pick six. Just a bad interception a quarterback with his experience should never throw. So it snowballed against them. At the same time, yeah, it's not a trap game, but it's a team that's not used to a high level of attention and success being able to handle it and then handle adversity the next time it comes around, and they weren't able to do so. It hurts for Fritz and his staff. It hurts for Pratt. They blew it. But at the same time, I think this Houston game is going to tell us where this team really is. There is a reason Tulane is less than a field goal underdog on the road against a program that's been better than them for a long time. Houston's a little down, and there's recognition that this roster quality and capability is up. First conference game, you get an extra, one less day to put that USM game behind you and bounce back. I think you're going to get Tulane's very best effort. And if they win over the Cougars, then I'm not going to say all is well and it erases the Southern Miss loss, but it completely rights the ship, and this team can start thinking big again, and they're more than capable of getting the job done.
Well, if they beat Houston, you've beaten Houston and Kansas State in the same season, as opposed to last year playing against Oklahoma and Ole Miss and losing to two of those Power 5 programs. I feel the same way you do. I got a feeling this team's going to come out ready to play against Houston on Friday night.
And they need to be able to run the ball again and not be able to play from behind, which, hey, they didn't have to play from behind against Kansas State. When they played from behind, Michael Pratt's not there yet. When I hear NFL Pratt, we even have one of our writers I have a lot of respect for, who's on the Michael Pratt bandwagon pro prospect. I'm not seeing it, just like I don't see it in Jalen Daniels, because they have the same weaknesses. You look at the stats, and Pratt's one of the worst starting quarterbacks in FBS in accuracy in the short passing game. And there's a reason for that. Sometimes his mechanics are off. He bails from the pocket too quickly because of the beatings he's taken in the past. And he's not the naturally accurate passer you would like to be. I think Jim Svoboda's doing a great job as far as scheming that offense, though, and having balance. So it's up to Pratt to be able to be consistent in these games. And if they do fall from behind, he's going to have to prove he can actually bring them back against good teams. I don't think Houston's that good of a team, honestly. They rank 82nd in the country in total offense, 118th in defense. This is more than a winnable game, and if this Tulane team has the intestinal fortitude to match their talent upgrade, they're going to go there and have more than a chance to win. I think they might be a better team than Houston. The difference may be, if it's close, Clayton Tune, I've seen him win close games. I don't know if Michael Pratt can make the key throws to win close games.
You got the last word of Tulane.
Well, I saw some of the Houston-Texas Tech game, and Texas Tech did everything they could possibly do to lose that game, and Houston wouldn't let them.
Yeah.
So this Houston team is not as good as we've seen in recent years, so they're definitely beatable. Generally speaking, I think Fritz's teams have responded well to bad performances or bad finishes.
True.
So I think they will play well on Friday night, and I think if they win, it shows that Kansas State was not a mirage. It showed that they laid an egg against Southern Miss, but that wasn't a fluke at Kansas State if they come back and win this week.
You guys like Tulane on Friday night?
I think Tulane's going to pull it out. Now, the higher scoring the game is, the more concerns I have for Tulane, but I think their defense matches really well against a Houston team that hasn't had a consistent running game. If the game's in the 20s, I love Tulane's chances of winning the game, and I have a feeling that's where it's going to be.
I think Tulane can win. I just hope it doesn't come down to a field goal.
There you go. Amen to that. All right, Pelicans. I mean, everything is positive coming out of the Pelicans right now. Zion is the best shape of his career. Again, they didn't go out and really mess with the roster at all. I'll take you first. What's the ceiling for this team this year?
Well, the ceiling, I think, is a top 4 seed in the West, where they get home court in the first round. I'm not predicting that, but I think they're capable of doing that if everything goes well. Now, that would probably require some adversity from somewhere in another market somewhere, because there's so many good teams in the Western Conference. But I could see them getting to that point. You know, I was at the interview session yesterday, and everyone was talking about the scrimmage the night before, Tuesday night, the second practice, they scrimmaged. And Willie Green talked about it, but Larry Nance Jr. also talked about it. All three players that we talked to, Alvarado and Trey Murphy, all three of them talked about how dominant Zion was in that practice. Now, it's a practice, but you can see how eager he is to get back on the court and prove who he is. And he's one of the best, I don't know, 15 players in the NBA based on what he's done in the best, maybe better, because we're assuming there's some growth there we haven't yet seen because he's been sidelined. And I think they're going to be able to figure out a way to fit him into this lineup, although it's going to take an adjustment period. But I think everyone, you know, they're going to say positive stuff in training camp. Nobody's going to say, boy, I was disappointed in how Zion.
Well, he really sucks.
Nobody's going to say that. But they were
mean it, Les. They mean it.
They were so enthusiastic and seemed so genuine in what they were saying. I think he knocked their socks off, and I think if he stays healthy, he's going to knock everybody's socks off.
Well, 2 points. First, ceiling, I agree with Les. Sure, why not top four in the West? And a big reason why, he talks about what happens in other markets. The Pelicans have such impressive depth, assuming that just Zion and Ingram play a bulk of the games with McCollum and their complementary depth with that. They're going to be putting a team on the floor more consistently more nights than a lot of other teams in the West that's going to be able to win. Whereas there's going to be load management and teams that have injuries who are going to have big drop-offs on given nights and stretches. I don't think the Pelicans are going to have that. Zion's in the best shape of his life. He's an absolute wrecking ball. And the one issue that you worry about is Ingram and Williamson. Now, I think they're going to spend a lot of time off the floor, one versus the other, while one can sort of run the ship. But Ingram has to have the ball in his hands to be successful. I don't necessarily think the Pelicans and Zion need that. So the Point Zion experiment worked well at the time. I think we might see less of that, except when the matchup dictates it, and that can win you the ball game. Because when Ingram is fully engaged, he can be a distributor and a scorer, and you get the best ball out of him on both ends of the floor. And I think Willie Green understands the psychology of his players on top of their given talents and what's best for the team, and he'll make that happen. Assuming that does happen, this team's going to be dangerous most nights. And for McCollum signing that extension, life's going to be sweet for him. He used to be the second banana on a team that had a ceiling of good but never could get over the hump. Now he can be the third guy making a ton of money, just getting wide open shots, and he's one of the best shooters to ever play the game. So he's going to have a pretty good life on this Pelicans team for the next couple of years, and I think they're absolutely going to be a contender. I'll be shocked if they don't win 50 games.
Me too, and I'm going to tell you right now, I think the one thing we'll be looking at is, first of all, the transition. How quickly can you integrate Zion into this? And then the floor spacing when he's on the floor. How many open shots guys are going to get, and they have to knock those shots down. He changes the whole dynamic of again, where they are on the floor and, again, how they're going to look. So I think the city should be excited, and I'm agree with you guys. Top four looks mainly the ceiling here. I'll be disappointed if they're not vying for the division championship.
And one thing for the spacing, Trey Murphy talked about this yesterday, extending his three-point range is something he's expecting to do this year, and that just creates more opportunities for everybody. The only thing I would caution followers, I think Willie Green's got a good handle on this, like you said, but the transition to Zion and B.I. playing together, and then figuring out the rotation, because he's probably got 12 or 13 candidates. He's got to get it down to 9 or 10. So October and November may not be as smooth as you want it to be, but be patient.
No doubt. Les East, Jude Young, thanks so much for joining us here on Inside New Orleans Sports. What a lively discussion it was today. Always good to have these two guys on the program. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. So many ways to be able to catch our program right now. We're so blessed to have so many opportunities for you, the audience, to be able to check it out. There's a QR code on the screen. Click that. It'll take you right to the WLAE-TV website, YouTube page, and also my website at ericasher.com. Catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM, Nashville. Nash Icon. That is weekdays 4 to 6. Of course, you can catch Jude on from 6 to 7 on Tuesdays. And, of course, the Countdown to the Original at 6 to 7 on Fridays. Both these gentlemen are there. Remember, iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio app, ericasher.com. Also, the Nash Icon website. Always to be able to catch the program. My podcast is on Anchor. We're on all podcasting platforms. Search Inside New Orleans Show with Eric Asher. And, of course, as always, we appreciate you guys watching the program today. Also supporting our underwriters who make this show possible. And, of course, thanks to our underwriters, also the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Logan Raffia, Alex Chacon, and our director, William Hill. For lessees, for Jude Young, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.